Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Alvarez coming to you from the boardroom here at Orange County Public Schools. Over the course of the last several months, our superintendent, Dr. Maria Vasquez, held 44 town halls across our district, listening closely to the concerns of district employees and parents as well. And one issue came up across the board consistently: student discipline. We know it's an issue across our country, across our state, and here in Central Florida. But here in our district, the superintendent is working to turn these conversations into action. Superintendent Vasquez recently sat down with me to talk about what she heard in those town halls, the concerns about behavior and discipline, and she's talking about what the district is working to do about it, including next steps and how we can all work together to create a safer school environment for our kids. I started by asking her what she specifically heard in those meetings.
One of the common themes that we heard at almost every single one of the town halls was discipline, and comments that were repeated: inconsistency in how we are dealing with discipline, not the perception that you can't write referrals, that children come back into class and that there really is no change in their behavior. Parents also commenting that their children are being impacted because they can't learn. There's disruptions in the classroom. And it really was eye-opening to see across all of those town halls that area of discipline being such a prevalent concern.
We're going to sort of dive into several of those issues that you just talked about. But before we do, let's talk about this task force that you have formed, because it is certainly an action item here, right? We're seeing all this conversation actually turn into action, and hopefully parents will find some comfort in that. What is the task force? How will it work? Who will it be made up of? And what exactly will they do?
One of the reasons I was having these town halls during my first 100 days was to really get a pulse about what's going well, what are things that we need to fix, and action items were going to come after my first 100 days. But because this was such a prevalent theme, I took action sooner, and that's the Discipline Task Force. It's going to be comprised of school-based administrators, deans. We're going to have our Classroom Teacher Association on the task force. Our support staff union will also be on there. Members of the faith-based organization. We have law enforcement that will be on there, and parents. They will be tackling the biggest concerns we're hearing around discipline. They will meet towards the end of the month, and my hope is that they will be finished and be able to provide recommendations to myself and our board by the end of the school year, so that then we can make those recommendations put them into action for the following school year.
So end of this school year.
Yes.
So you're moving fast.
Yeah, it's a concern. It really is a concern, and I so much so that I called a principals meeting yesterday, as a matter of fact, and all administrators were on that call, but they were invited to also include anyone on their staff that deals with discipline, so that they had a clear understanding as to what my expectations were surrounding discipline. A lot of misconceptions out there about not being able to write referrals, that there are quotas in place, that there are negative consequences if your school has too many referrals, and all of that is not true. It is not accurate. And I wanted them to hear from me, the superintendent, what my expectations were, and that is that if a child does not follow the code of conduct, that we will follow our process, that we will be consistent, and that it doesn't matter if the child has a disability, if the child is new to the school. If they break one of our rules, one of the items in our code of conduct, we will write a referral to document that behavior. Now, the consequences may differ,
Right.
but we need to ensure that we are consistent so that students know what the expectations are, parents know what the expectations are, and so do our teachers. The other thing that I was very clear about is that each school needed to have a culturally embedded positive behavior plan that is school-wide. And we have many of our schools that have that in place. But there are others that it's in name only or it's not fully implemented. And our staff is ready to provide whatever support is needed so that we are all moving in the right direction. And I believe that those two items are going to be critical to be able to begin to see a change in the perception of how we're dealing with discipline and the behaviors.
Okay. Bullying. It just continues to be an issue despite, all the campaigns we've seen and all the conversations we've had in schools and programs that come in and go. It just still is an issue. What more can schools and the district do?
So interestingly enough, one of the positive ideas that came out in our town halls around this notion of discipline had to do with cell phones. And I want to be clear, we have schools where parents and staff were saying, oh no, discipline's not a concern here. Students, we are following the code of conduct, we are being consistent, and they would talk about things that they had in place. One of the ones that really was startling was around cell phones. And so we have a couple of our middle and high schools that have put into place a practice where cell phones are not allowed out on campus. And so from the minute you step onto the campus until you leave, your cell phones cannot be out. And they report a significant drop in their discipline referrals, fighting, and bullying. And when I pushed a little to ask, well, tell me more, they say a lot of the bullying now takes place through social media. And so if you don't have your phones out at lunch or when you're passing or in the morning while you're waiting for school to start or in the afternoon, that cuts down on that behavior.
Okay. Certainly top of mind for everyone is students who make a threat at school, students who bring a weapon to school. I have to believe this is something the task force will also take a look at. Do you anticipate changes when it comes to dealing with that issue and those students?
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, during our town halls, school safety was not one of the top concerns, and it didn't even come up in every one of our town halls. But the events that we've seen recently, and even this entire school year, are very alarming to me. We take threats very seriously. My student advisory council that's made up of representatives from all of our high schools have been working on a campaign that words matter. But even with that, we continue to see children making poor choices about making threats. And so absolutely, the task force will be tackling that. But I do want to also commend our parents, our students, because we continually say, if you see or hear something, say something, and they have. And so in many instances, we've been able to get ahead of a threat before anyone gets on campus with a weapon or before there's any type of actual action on a threat.
Whether it's a child who makes a threat or a child who acts up in the classroom, I know it complicates things when that child has special needs. And that gets back to the consistency issue, right? That you saw time and time again. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and that is another one of the themes that came out during our town halls was that we aren't disciplining, we're not writing referrals with students that have special needs. And so we need to clarify that referrals can be written if any child, whether they are special needs or not, violates the code of conduct. What's different is how we deal with that misbehavior depending on the child's disability and the interventions and supports that are in place.
I know you also wanted to take this time to address parents directly who will also see this interview, because we're all in this together. And there is a lot parents can do at home to help with these issues at school.
Absolutely. I think that we need parents more than ever to continue to talk with your child, know what they're doing on social media, check their backpacks, those conversations about if you see or hear something, say something. And, something else that maybe we don't realize, sometimes we inadvertently put our children in situations that may create this type of issue. For example, we all have been in car lines in the afternoon to pick up children, and we're waiting and waiting. And so we may tell our child, you know what, I'm not going to pick you up at school. Let's go, I'll pick you up next door. So now we have children unsupervised in an area where they could get into a fight. We could get into bullying, and then that trickles over into the school. So I ask parents support that we do need to work together to make our schools safer, to help our children deal with conflict. Sometimes they just make poor choices because they don't know how to interact in a manner that is not aggressive. And I know that together we're going to be able to overcome this obstacle.
And we're going to continue these conversations throughout the school year, and we're also looking forward to seeing what that task force comes up with and following that as well. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Nancy.